So I get the pleasure of introducing Heather McTeer Toney to you. Heather knows what it means to be a public servant. She was the first African American, the first female, and at age 27, the youngest person to serve as mayor of Greenville, Mississippi. And not only that, she got elected twice. The daughter of a civil rights attorney and a public school teacher, Heather was born and raised in Greenville, Mississippi. She earned a bachelor's degree from Spelman College in Atlanta and a law degree from Tulane University. In 2003, she was elected mayor of the city of Greenville and then re-elected for a second term in 2007. Under her leadership, the city thrived. It emerged from significant debt and received millions of dollars in grants and federal assistance. In 2014, she was appointed by President Barack Obama as regional administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency's Southeast region. This includes 8 southeastern states, ones you'll know: Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Tennessee, and 6 federally recognized tribes: the Catawba Nation, Eastern Band of the Cherokee, Miccosukee of the Florida, Mississippi Band of Choctaw, Powhatan of Band of Creek, and the Seminoles of Florida, making Region 4 the most populated and diverse of the 10 EPA regions, where Heather was responsible for protecting public health and the environment. Known for her energetic and genuine commitment to people, her work has made Heather a national figure in the area of public service, environmental justice, and community engagement. Heather's a member of numerous organizations, is an avid athlete, and loves triathlons. She's an active member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority and the New Living Way Christian Fellowship Church. She and her husband have 3 kids. Heather's currently the National Field Director of Moms Clean Air Force, an organization of over 1 million moms and dads committed to fighting climate change and protecting children from the
It's such a pleasure to be here, and I hope you all will allow me a moment to help us all center myself as well. Anytime I have an opportunity to speak to people of faith, it gives me an opportunity to share my faith and also to do things in a little different way, so I enjoy these times. So will you allow me that? Yes. Will you do this with me? Everybody take a deep breath in and blow it out. Take another deep breath in. And as you're breathing out this time, just begin to center yourself. Feel the energy of the people around you. Feel the faith and love of the people who have gathered here today. Feel the energy of those who have come before us. And through them, we are allowed to be in this space and share. Dear God, I thank you for this opportunity, and I am oh so grateful to once again be in not only your presence, but among your people in a place of service. I now ask that you think through my mind, you speak through my mouth. Let it be none of me, but all of you. Amen. Amen. You know, I was thinking about this for a while when Michael and Paul, thank you so much for inviting me, and my dear friend I spoke with at United Methodist Women in Texas and had an opportunity to share. I was thinking about how I would come and what I would say, and you probably have seen or read, my title for today is Peter, Paul, and Pollution. And I know some people were looking like, oh, where is she gonna go with this? And I was going to do this wonderful presentation and PowerPoint and everything, and as I was thinking through it, just the stillness that we just had, for me it was like we need to talk about environmental justice and what's happening in creation care from a heart perspective. We talk a lot about, actions and what we're supposed to do, and that's good. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about some how-tos. But we have to start in the heart of the matter, because that's our responsibility. Our responsibility in the work that we do in creation care and in environmental justice and in all of our work, particularly as people of faith, wherever we come from. It really boils down to loving other people, loving our space, and that's a heart matter. And for me, when I talk about movement building and being inclusive and creating spaces of justice, I can't help but think about where I come from. You heard my bio, I'm from Mississippi. My mom and dad came to Mississippi as part of the civil rights movement, voters' rights movement in particular. And so they were supposed to come from Baltimore, Maryland to Mississippi for 2 years. 45 years later, I'm 43. Not only have they still been a part of the community, but they have laid a foundation to which now their children, myself and my brother and their grandchildren, are not only an active part of what we believe is social justice, but it's in everything that we do. And so that's why I think of this, again, from a space of heart. Now, the other side of this is, as I have dug through sort of my family history and understanding how I came to be where I am, I realized that my great-great-grandmother was Pentecostal. My godfather is was white and Jewish from New York, and I have spent time in spaces in Islamic communities and so many different kinds of faith that all comes together sometimes. So it is now at a space for me where I am at a juncture of life of understanding that in order for us really to all come together and understand why it is so critical, why climate issues are such a social justice issue for our time, is it because it impacts everybody. And so when I was thinking about, how Peter and Paul sort of came into this story again in my thinking of faith, I go way back again to my background in Mississippi and where I come up from and how we define our faith in creation care. It's interesting because for Black folks in the South, we don't really get into faith from the damnation perspective. Okay, and now this is where I'm going to need some feedback, because I told y'all Pentecostal, Jewish, Islamic, Missionary Baptist is where I was baptized. So let the church say amen. Amen. Y'all understand? Okay. So when we think about how well our communities work in these spaces, it's ingrained in what we have been a part of in terms of our faith for years. When we were coming into our faith, and I know particularly when I think about, going to Sunday school and all the stories I would hear, there was a responsibility that we were proud of. The fact that we were no longer enslaved Africans and no longer had to be on a plantation somewhere, but we're given a responsibility from God, and we're now in charge of making sure that we are caring for something very special. I had to remember when my dad was telling me, Heather, there's a reason why Black men and Black women, when they got into the church, there was a pride, because that was the only space on Sunday where they could be outside of the field and outside of the working environment and be in their Sunday best and be in their suit and look at people eye to eye and know that the God that they were serving was the same as anybody else. Amen. That was the only time and the only space. That was the only time when a Black man in the South who was walking up and down the sidewalks did not have to avert his eyes when somebody else was walking by, but he could look up proudly as that deacon, the mother's board that sits on the right hand of the church. When I grow up, I want to be a member of the mother's board, if I didn't tell you that before. That's my goal in life. But that mother's board, those elderly women who were sitting on the right-hand side on the front pew in their all white, who, Lord knows to this day, have $1 million worth of peppermint in any one of their bags. They were the caretakers, and that was a valued responsibility. So it begs the question, then how in the world are we now in a place where environmental justice communities feel like they don't matter when it comes to creation, when this is the responsibility that we've had for years? We've grown up knowing this connection to the land because we have worked it. Our blood is in it. Very similar to our Native American and indigenous people. very similar to our Latino communities. People of color have been intricately connected with land from the beginning of time. So how are we now in a space where we feel as if we don't own it? Okay. Let's go back and let's talk about Peter and Paul. You know, it's interesting, the whole church at Antioch, and if you know anything about sort of the Peter-Paul story, this is going to be Heather's interpretation. And I will tell you now, one of my favorite versions of the Bible is the Common English Version, because I feel like when I'm reading Common English Version, I can sort of add my attitude to it, and like, you know, I can feel sort of like the neck rolls. Whoever wrote that version, they wrote that for me. And so, you know, when I'm studying this and I'm reading this, and particularly, you know, thinking back, and I want you to go back in your study time and read sort of the book of Galatians. It's fascinating in the Common English Version, because you sort of see what's going on. And let me try to lay the foundation for you. You know, we're in Antioch. And Antioch is the place where, a lot of people believe Christianity began, from the first Christians came from Antioch. But the space, we think about Peter and Paul, we don't often think about the people who were in this space. At that particular time in history, there were roughly 250,000 people who were taking up this space. And this was a time of Roman persecution. So you had people there were coming from all walks of life, Jews that were running from Romans because they were now saying they were Christians. You had migrants who were coming from other countries because they thought this was a safe space. Does that sound familiar to anyone? You had people, because this was considered that part, I think about Turkey, I could be wrong, but people who were coming from different spaces, all walks of life, dealing with very difficult issues. And one of the shining lights at this time was this new thing that we were naming Christianity, the following of Christ. But there were different people with different perspectives on what you should do. You know, how are you a Christian? So we have Peter, who walked with Christ, and who has a way of teaching. And his way of teaching is sort of more the upper echelon, or as I can say from the black community, the bougie folks. You know, sort of with the law and trying to keep things in line and guiding people. And then comes Paul, who is this random person who was really persecuting Christians and all of a sudden has seen the light and is like, I'm going to teach folks like I'm going to teach people. And they're in conflict. And so when you start reading in the book of Galatians, you see that, you know, you have these, we see these two different factions that are teaching the same thing, want people to get to the same space in this community of people of diversity, community of migrants, community of Jews, community of people from all different places. And they're going back and forth with each other. And all of this back and forth had to do with who was sitting down to go to dinner with who. Now this blows me away. Because this was really a fight about the fact that Paul came to Antioch, was teaching folks one way, and found out that the folks that were with Peter were sitting down to dinner with the Gentiles who Paul was teaching. But when Paul showed up, then all of a sudden they were too good to sit down with the Gentiles. And they had to go back and only sit with the Jews. And Paul was saying, wait a minute now. Before we came, you would sit with everybody, the migrants, the Jews, the Gentiles. But now all of a sudden, after we're here, you want to do something different. Where they do that at? That's Heather's interpretation. And so there's this conflict back and forth between them about how we should teach the people. But nobody ever really talks about the fact that the people had a lot of stuff going on and they were sort of being left out of the conversation. And so it brought me to this realization that even now, as we're talking about environmental justice, and we're talking about how to connect with communities of color, and we're talking about how to elevate the issues of pollution, of health, in a space of people who need this information, we are forgetting the people. Because you cannot talk about climate, you cannot talk about health impacts, you cannot talk about environmental issues without taking up the issues of the whole people. Just this week at Mom's Clean Air Force, in fact, last night I was looking at the fact that we were getting ready to do a press release in support of our mothers who may be impacted by the atrocious raids that may take place. We are Mom's Clean Air Force. We are not an immigration organization. We are focused on eliminating pollution and the impacts of climate change on children. But it is not lost on us that these impacts are not only devastating, but the mothers we're working for are concerned that they may get picked up. And it was important for us to acknowledge the whole person. Because you can't work on climate issues if you are scared to death whether or not you can't go to work or your child is not going to be safe at school. You cannot focus on air pollution if you are focused on whether or not you have medication for your family. You cannot focus on climate change if you are worried about whether or not there is food on your table, a house over a roof over your head, or if your child is going to be shot by the police. We have to take up the whole person, and that's what was really getting me about this, is that as I was reading, there was this conflict between these two about how to do something, and there was no conversation about the people. And that's not what God was saying, and it actually comes back. You keep reading, and you get to a place, and I'm going to talk about it when we talk through some steps here. But, you get to this place, and you realize that our charge in creation care, our charge in our faith, the number one thing we're supposed to do is love, and love cannot be separated into different segments. There cannot be love of gun advocacy, love then racism, love then climate. You have to do all of it together. And that's the one thing we've sort of been missing out of, particularly when we talk about environmental justice. Because I see people in organizations going into communities of color all the time, and they're saying, why are they not so worried? Why are they not so concerned? We should be fighting for these things. Well, you cannot fight for something if you do not know whether or not, when you get up the next day, if somebody is going to rush into your home. So we have to figure out a way to link these things together, because they are irrevocably linked. And as we have that conversation, we now can figure out, how do we address communities where they are? So I want to talk about that through the lens of this story. There are 5 things that I think are critically important to making sure that as we work in these different spaces and these different communities, we're bringing our whole selves. So each and every one of you in here has an experience that is of value to the person that is next to you, as well as to the community that you're working with. So now I gave you a fair warning. I told y'all missionary, Baptist, Pentecostal, Jewish, all that together. So now we're going to have to interact with each other. We okay? Yeah. All right. So I need you to turn to the person to your right and say, you are of value. Oh, some of y'all, we need to take y'all back to some churches. You are of value. Why am I having you do that? Okay? And then you just turn to the person to the right, turn to the person to the left, and I want you to, even if you may not be a touchy person, just touch them. It's okay. And say, I appreciate you. And you're like, oh my God, she's making us touch each other. There's a reason I ask people to do that. Because there's energy that is transferred. And there's love that is transferred just through the power of touch. And it helps us to break down barriers. Just when we have an opportunity to even do something as share fingertips with each other. There's an energy transference there. And so that Transference is what we're going to talk about a little bit now. I said there are 5 things that we have to do when we're talking about really engaging in this work, particularly environmental justice in communities of color. The first one, and if you're taking notes, I told you I was giving you homework. Go back and read Galatians. And I think it's important. I look at the Bible from a historical perspective. I think it's a book that we can all read. And you should also read other books of faith. And I'm so grateful for other faiths being here and being interconnected with us, because it shows us not only how we have this opportunity to work together, but how there's value in all of our faiths coming together. So in Galatians chapter 2, verses 6 and then verse 12, go back and read it for yourself. This is common English. It says, he had been eating with Gentiles before certain people came from James, Jesus' brother. But when they came, he began to back out and separate himself because he was afraid of the people who promoted circumcision. So this is what I was telling you about, you know? It's like at first, I can eat with you, you cool, but now when Peter's folks show up, I can't be seen with you. Rule number 1, always be authentic. Always be authentic. People are always watching you. And so when you're going into a space and working and talking about environmental justice and why it's so important to fight that big incinerator down at the end of the block, but you're the same person that they see on Facebook and you're talking about racial issues, people see that. And they will not separate it. And so you have to be authentic in everything that you do. You cannot go into a community and sit at a table and talk about how important it is, and then when you go to the grocery store, you see that same person and you walk by them and do not speak. You cannot go and promote that there be an event at a public school, and then you turn around and they give you an invitation to come to their church and you politely decline over and over and over again. You cannot be in a room with other of your colleagues or people who look like you and be afraid to speak up when somebody says something off color. Why? Because that's not being authentic, and people see it and they know it, and they will not invite you back into your spaces, and you will never understand why. Because they will not say it to you. All they will do is a head nod and say, we know, all right. They're not real. And that's what happened here. Paul was calling them out to say, hey, wait a minute. Before James, Jesus' brother, showed up, y'all were good with everybody coming over to the house for the barbecue. But now that Jesus' brother came through, all of a sudden you're too good to come to the barbecue. What's up with that? How much does that happen in our own communities? All over this country. And we do not recognize that people are looking at us and they are watching us. Rule number 1 is you must always be authentic wherever you are and whatever you're doing. Because, like I said, people are always watching. All right, turn to the person behind you and say, I'm watching you. Now you're like, oh my gosh, she put us on the spot. Yes, I did. Do you know why? The reason why is because it comes now into accountability. We are each other's brother and sister's keeper. We have a responsibility to one another, to our faith, to be examples of at all times. At all times. And so we have to hold each other accountable for our actions and what we're doing. And it's okay, we can do that in love. But it's always important. The second thing after being authentic is to be empowering. Say, be empowering. Be empowering. Empowering is not speaking for someone else, it is giving them the mic to speak for themselves. Empowering is the ability that you have to open the door for somebody else. It is you having a connection to someone who sits on the county commission and saying that, you know what, there's going to be an opportunity to speak, and I have this connection. Why don't you come speak and represent your community? Not me saying, give me the notes and I'll talk for you. So often we have these opportunities with communities, particular communities of color and environmental justice communities where, we come in and we think we can solve the world, all the problems, because we know everything. And we do not allow people to speak for themselves and allow a transference of that power that we have to engage other people and empower them to elevate their voice. Because folks know how to talk and tell their own story. We had this past week at Play-In, we have all of these families that come in and they have an opportunity to, play, and then after that they go to lobby on the Hill. So we have all these moms and kids and dads and grandmas in their shirts, and they're on the Hill, and they're going in and out of offices, and they're telling their story. Well, I was put with a family from Delaware. I am not from Delaware. Who's from Delaware? Okay. I was with a family from Wilmington, Delaware, because the person who was supposed to be leading that group was sick, got sick at the last minute. I have done a lot of lobbying, as you could probably imagine, in my lifetime. But I said to them, I said, we're going into these spaces, and while I can talk about environmental issues all day, they want to hear from you. They want to hear your story. They don't want to hear me. They want to hear about your interactions, however you say it. And that's the beautiful thing about what we do, is that when you empower somebody to tell their own story and they hear their voice, it gives and transfers an energy to let them know they can do it again. Part of the fear that we have is that when we start doing this work, we don't know what we will sound like. We don't know what we will look like. There are these little things that go off in our head and say, I can't say that. I don't, am I supposed to be here? Am I supposed to be doing this? What am I going to say? It's not going to come out right. And the mother that I was with, she said to me, I have this beautiful thing all in my head about what I'm going to say, and I don't know what I'm going to say. I said, when you sit down at that table, whatever comes out, comes out. She sat down at the table and she had her daughter with her, who immediately wanted to nurse. So she began nursing at the table, and she began telling her story, and she began crying. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. All right. They work for us. Right. Yeah. It's fine. This is your office. Right. Treat it like your office. You do what you want to do. And when we came out of that meeting, she was like, I didn't know what I was going to say, but it went okay. I said it did. She was fabulous for the other two meetings. Why? Because now she had been empowered, and she was able to do and tell her story in her own way, in her own comfort, with whatever had happened at that moment in time. And now I have no doubt whatsoever that not only will she continue to do this, but she can tell other people as well. That's the value of being empowering. That's the value of showing people that they can speak and that their voice is valuable. Because in so many of these spaces, we find that people don't get an opportunity to share until travesty happens. See, it wasn't until Flint happened that you heard from Flint residents. Think about that. It wasn't until the water crisis happened that you saw the pictures from Flint. But that had been going on for years. And they had been talking about it for years. It wasn't until you saw Trayvon Martin and you saw the deaths of African Americans by the police all over the news that it got attention and voice elevation, and you saw organizations like Black Lives Matter start. But that's not the first time that it happened. It's been going on for years. It was the elevation of a voice. In the climate justice movement, when we begin to give people the microphone and let them speak for themselves, you will see an elevation of the issues in their communities. And then we become the assets and the tools that they use to help elevate that voice. So now I want you to say, I'm an elevator. All right, so we are authentic. We're going to be empowering. Well, if we're doing all that, what's the third thing we're going to do? We're going to be super encouraging. Woo! This is one of my favorite things because I like to be a natural cheerleader, and I wish I was a cheerleader. I was never a cheerleader in school. But to be encouraging to people is something that I think is genuine to our faith. Yes. It really, really is when you think about it. Like, I have this concept. First of all, I think God has an awesome sense of humor. Amen. And I think that, God laughs all the time. And I know there is a constant conversation taking place between my Lord and my angels when they're like, this child here. I don't know what we're going to do with her. But when we get to her, we're going to talk about all the stuff that she has done. But it's the encouragement and the motivation. It's the encouragement and motivation that we see throughout Scripture. You see it throughout faith. It is the idea that when we really dig into the knowledge that we have an entity that is always behind us saying, go, 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 go. You can do it. Go, 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 go. You can do it. It's all right. It's okay. I got you. I got your back. When you really think through the Scripture, that's what God says to us all the time. But he also wants us to do that to other people. Wants us to be the encouraging factor to others, to say, you got this. You can do it. It's all right. It's going to be okay. And a beautiful place that you see this, you see it all the time in praise and worship songs. Think through this, people. It's right there for us. Like, if we really just sort of use the idea of our faith in action, getting to the heart of the matter of how we really implement these things that we want people and communities to do, it's right there in front of us. I remember, just sort of being encouraging has to be a part of what we're doing, because encouragement has been a part of social justice movements since civil rights. Like, you have to be dug in deep and constantly encouraging and singing and motivating if you are going to march from Selma to Montgomery. That's not a silent march. You have to be encouraging and motivating when you are constantly turned down or turned away, or there seems to be no way forward. That's the time when you have to be constantly encouraging and motivating to the groups that are working in these spaces. Because they're working in spaces where, yes, the system seems like it is set up, and we are fighting things where they're so much bigger than us. At Moms this year, we were pushing back against the mercury and air toxic standard, which, while 8 years ago we thought this had been put to bed when EPA established these standards that were protecting communities, babies, and children from the dangers of mercury, which we know impacts babies' brains. All of a sudden this year they decided, we don't need it, it's all right. And we're saying, no. The last group you really want to mess with is mamas. Yeah. So this means, we got to get back up and get out here. But it means, we had some folks that, like, oh my God, we got to do this again. It's the government. They're making changes. Oh, is it really going to happen? And that's when the encouragement has to kick in. That's when the tenacity to keep moving forward. And the thing I could think about, at New Hope First Baptist Missionary Church, when I was a little girl, there was a song they would always sing that said, I don't feel no ways tired. And I can remember the choir, I don't feel no ways tired. I remember that. And that was the encouragement for everybody in that room to not get tired, to keep on going, to keep on pushing. I come too far from where I started from, as the lyrics go. Nobody told me that the road would be easy, but I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. That was the lyrics. And they were just singing over and over and over again. And it was the encouragement that no matter what was going on, no matter what was happening in life, no matter how low you had gotten, I still don't feel tired, Because the God that I serve, the same God he was yesterday, he is today, and he will be tomorrow. He does not change. And I can trust in, believe, and rely on that so long as I know that fact, I can get up, because the sun, as far as I know, will rise the next day. And if that's going to happen, I'm going to have and get up with the same grace and mercy and energy and keep moving forward. That's the enthusiasm you have to put into the justice movement. Because that's the energy and enthusiasm that we know. We saw it with voters' rights, but we haven't seen it yet with justice, with climate issues. It's one of the things we're doing at Moms Clean Air Force with Community RX, which is our program that's African American faith-based. It is encouraging, empowering moms to use the tools that they have been given all of these years and connecting them to the climate issues. And showing how this is not only the existential threat that we know will impact our children, but it is the social justice movement of our time, and that if we do not take a stand on it and act on it now, we will be in a space of irreversible change. Amen. And it is connecting those mothers to their faith and to the land and to the things that they have known since existence. That deep spiritual connection that we have and that God has given us a responsibility for. See, it's connecting us to that, but you gotta encourage. It brings me to my next thing, and we're on thing now. We've been authentic, we're empowering, we've been encouraging. Number 4, we have to be loud and we have to share. Now, being loud, I think, is important. If you haven't figured that out already. For a couple of reasons. One, so people can hear you. And I trust in here that you can hear me without a doubt. But, going back to my dear friend Paul and looking at what he was writing, again, I love the Common English version, because when Paul was writing this letter to Galatians, you could tell sort of like, he was like, I'm tired of this going back and forth. I have done all that I'm going to do. So there is this, my favorite verse in Galatians chapter 6. It's verse 11. And in the Common English Bible, it reads like this. Look at the large letters I am making with my own handwriting. I'm telling y'all, this is one of the greatest letters you'll ever read. You gotta read it. You gotta go back and read it. Paul was saying, how much louder do I have to make this? How much more do I have to say? I am writing in big, bold letters here, people. He was making it very clear. You all have heard the scripture, write the vision, make it plain. He was making it very clear what his position was, and he was sharing it. That, for us in this day, is social media. It is you getting on social media and tweeting out or on Facebook and taking pictures and sharing with your networks the work that you are doing, because it shows communities of color that you are not afraid to show that you are with them. It says that I'm here with you, I'm going to be loud about it, and I'm not going anywhere. And I'm going to share that. So this is what our exercise is going to be now. Now, how many of you all have Facebook or Twitter? I love it. This is what we're going to do right at this moment. One of my favorite exercises. Take your phone out. I'm going to try to do this with a microphone in my hand. All right. And I want everybody, first I'm going to take a selfie with everybody. And then I'm going to tell you to take a selfie, a us-see, or whatever you want to do with people right around you. And we're about to share with our networks where we are, what we're doing, okay? Active exercise. So I need everybody to sort of stand. Ooh, we're going to try to make this happen. Okay. All right. So you don't have to stand up, but I need everybody to sort of wave this way when I tell you to, okay? All right. Everybody start. Okay, we got countdown. Everybody start waving. Yay, okay. All right, so now I'm going to tweet that out at Clean Air Moms and at hashtag UM Creation Care. Did I get that hashtag right? UMC Creation Care, okay? So if you're on Twitter, on Facebook, that's what we're going to use right now. I'm going to give everybody about 15 seconds, and I want you to take your own Ussie, selfie, something, wherever you are with the people you're with. Okay, go. And I'm going to tweet this out real quick. Go to Twitter. Gonna add this person and you take a picture that way. Okay, no, okay. So this is what we're gonna turn the camera around. How do you turn your camera? Oh, here. No. Here it is, right here. There it is. There you go. Okay.
What am I?
Yeah, okay, this is what we're gonna do. There you go, okay. Right there. Uh-huh.
Heather, I'm waiting for you afterwards.
Okay, yay! Yay. Okay, y'all tag me at Clean Air Moms too. At Clean Air Moms, or say Moms Clean Air Force. Heather is awesome. Okay, hashtag UMC create. Oh, already I can see your hashtag is trending. See how fast this works? Oh, look at the Lord. Okay. Having an awesome time. Talking. Hashtag Creation Care. Man, y'all are on it. Smiley emoji, smiley emoji. Yay. Tweeting, yay. Woohoo, okay. So, yeah, okay, there you go. Now, what did we just do?
If you're on Facebook, you can also hit the location button and you'll see Creation Care Summit right there.
Facebook. Now see, I didn't even know Beth Vaughn was in the room. Beth, where are you? Oh. I'm looking at you. And all I see is like, first thing that popped up was Beth Vaughn. So, what did we just do? What did you just do? Oh, I'm so excited about this. So, you just shared. And with everybody in this room, you just reached thousands of people within the last 5 minutes. The last 5 minutes, you have now touched thousands of people to tell them that we are collectively working on creation care. You just became loud. Give yourselves a round of applause for that. You got to keep it up. Every time you go into a community, every time you sit down at a table, every time you're talking about an issue, stop, take a moment, share with your networks. A couple of things happen. First of all, your networks begin to pick up the fact that this is serious for you. You're working on this all the time. And when I say your networks, I don't just mean those people who are close to you, because 9 times out of 10, your friends and families and neighbors, they pretty much know what you do. But it's those acquaintances, it's those friends of friends that, you know, now feel comfortable because they see you and your activity. And once, when there was no door, they see now a door and a space and an opportunity to say and have a voice that you just created. Share and be loud. Be like Paul, write it in big letters. All caps goes a long way. Last thing, and then I get to open up for some questions. Be consistent. Be consistent. One of the worst things to create that has happened and has created such mistrust in communities of color has been parachuting in and out. It's showing up because the news cameras are there, something traumatic has happened, and you want to help, and then something else comes and you leave. It is throwing money at a problem and not having the heart behind the support. It is not genuinely, consistently being there when necessary. You have to be consistent because building trust takes time. I have a teenager, and I tell her all the time, baby, you messed yourself up because you want to go out and do some things, but if we cannot trust you, then we cannot allow you to do what you would like to do. So now you have to rebuild the trust with your father and I in order to do what you want to do. And rebuilding trust takes time. And we always want to take the quick way around it, because she's like, okay, can't you just take my phone for a week and then I can go back? No, not how this works. Not how it works. No. Because you need the trust. You'll need the trust when you don't realize you need it, right? So you'll realize later on you need that trust. See, she doesn't realize she needs the trust until all of a sudden an activity comes up that she really wants to go to, but she hadn't rebuilt the trust yet. So she's still in that rebuilding trust phase. So it's like something happens, and I'm saying, you got to rebuild the trust. Oh, there's a basketball game. Can I go to the basketball game? No, hadn't rebuilt that trust yet. Oh, man. Rebuilding trust takes time. So let's not try to break it. And we don't break it by being consistent and showing up all the time. It also means we got to give folks a little opportunity to engage, because they're feeling us out. I have this sort of 3-meeting rule that I had when I was in office on a local level and on a federal level, working with communities. Because usually, as a mayor, well, I'm not going to say usually, but a lot of times as a mayor, and especially as regional administrator, by the time I get involved, the situation is really bad, and everybody's mad, right? So we screwed up, somebody else is screwed up, and people are just upset. And that's usually at the point in time that I enter. So I would have this 3-meeting rule. And my 3-meeting rule was, if you show up 3 times, then that's your working team. What does that mean? The first meeting that I'm going to have, if it's a community meeting, it's a collective meeting, everybody coming together, everybody's going to be upset. So that means that you're going to have to sit, and I'm going to have to sit, and they're going to vent. And I'm going to have to be okay with the venting. Sometimes people just need to get it out because they've got to rebuild that trust. So that's that first meeting. It's the hard one. It's one a lot of times people don't make it past because feelings can be hurt. Things can be said that are very offensive because there's a lot of emotion that's built up. You think about it. You go into a community. We had one that I worked in North Alabama. And this community had suffered from generations of pollution because there was a coke plant right on the other side of the very physical track. And the black community had been hearing for years that somebody was going to come and help them in their situation. But when I tell you nobody had been coming and showing up, nobody had been coming and showing up. And I had one elderly man, his name was Mr. Smith. I know it seems like a very common name, but trust me, I will never forget Mr. Smith. Because Mr. Smith showed up. He had the pictures of all of his loved ones that had died from cancer. And he said to my face, "What are you going to do any differently than anybody else?" And he left. And I told him, I said, I'm going to be here. I'm going to show up. But it was that contention of a community coming because they need somebody to vent at. And oftentimes we're in those spaces and we come to the space because we want to get the work done, right? But you have to have that first meeting that vents. And you promise you're going to come back at least twice to get this up and going. The second meeting, people are coming to because they're curious. The first meeting is the sort of emotional one. The second one is the curiosity. Because it's like, okay, we got 2 meetings here. And that first one, you sort of had to listen and vent. That second one, you're asking for, okay, what are we going to do? And people are curious because they want to, I'm gonna say it two ways. They're curious, but they're also nosy. They're curious because they want to know what's going to happen and what you're doing, what the plans are, what you're thinking about. But they're also nosy because they want to see what others of their friends and neighbors have shown up too. So that second meeting is one of curiosity. The third meeting, though, that's the gem. Because the people who show up to the third meeting, those are your workers. Those are the people that you can rely on and that you can depend on because they're there for the cause. Now that third meeting, now you're starting to put together some groups and some action plans, and you can begin the work of what you want to do. And that is very, very true when you're working in communities of color. Wherever you are in the country, you have to first sit down and listen, engage the curiosity, and then empower people to plan to work. That doesn't mean you sit down and, dole out duties. It's a two-way process. And so by that third meeting, now people are there, you know who's working. And it's interesting because people who can't make it, they'll send a message by somebody else. And they'll say, oh, such and such couldn't make it, but she said, let us know what you need her to do and just sign her up. She'll be happy to help. Right. That happens, okay? And you want to activate those people. You want to activate what I call the armchair activists. It's the ones that, they maybe can't get out to every single thing that you need them to do. And you find this particularly important, and it'll happen in a lot of EJ communities because there's that building trust. So you'll find those folks who okay, we may have some engagement here. I tell you what, my sorority is doing something and I can't make it to the meeting, but if you give me the flyers, I'll pass it out at the sorority meeting. That's a network that you want to engage in because now we're opening doors and we're engaging other groups and other audiences to listen to and talk about what we want to do. Consistency is key. So back to Peter and Paul and pollution. Eventually, as you continue to read, we know, of course, by today, that not only has Christianity flourished throughout the world, but the idea of working together through love and with people is something that we've had to work on in a number of different environments, right? We're not doing anything differently or encountering any new challenges that were not encountered by the people we read about, by our ancestors, by people from different communities and continents and countries. We all, when you break it down, have to deal with sort of the same stuff over and over again. But the way that we operate it is through love. And when we're thinking about and embracing the entire community and everything that comes with it, if we are authentic, if we are empowering, encouraging people very loudly and very consistently, we are building a network that can engage in climate in a way that multiplies the same way our tweets and social media just did. Spreading messages. And it happens rapidly, and you'll see it because you'll turn on the news and you'll watch the newscaster say, we can't figure out how in the world did climate change now become the #1 issue and topic that voters are concerned about. You didn't know we were down there working, did you? You didn't know that mamas were on the ground. And we're talking to our PTA groups and our sorority groups and everybody else. You did not know that we were having these conversations in our churches and our synagogues. You did not realize that we were talking about this in the carpool lane. We were talking about this when we were walking around the track. We were talking about this in the grocery store. You did not know and understand that we are moving and very fluidly having these conversations and engaging and empowering people to talk and make action. I will leave you with this. I know how important these things are, but I want to impress upon you how connected we are. I had the opportunity with moms. We went and we do these power summits. We call them Moms Power Summits all over the country. And we encourage our groups to, do something on a local level. Our group in Montana is a little different because Montana is very, very spread out, of course. It's beautiful, it's mountainous, but they want to do something different. They said, we don't want to sort of do like a one-day summit because it's really hard for all of our moms to come together. We want to do sort of like a weekend retreat and start teaching our moms how to go into policy positions, how to be appointed to boards and commissions, because what we recognized was that there are a lot of open board and commission seats that people can just ask to be on in their local community that are decision making. So it is the sustainability board in your city council that the mayor gets to appoint. And you go and you ask, when is the next seat open? Is there a seat open? Would you consider appointing me? Because I can tell you, as a mayor, we have lots of boards and commissions, and we're always looking for people to fill those seats. And no matter what it is, when you go in with an environmental mindset, you're always thinking about climate and environmental issues wherever you are. So you can be sitting on the transportation board, and if you're on the transportation board, your conversation there is, well, how can we do this in a more sustainable fashion? How can we do this such we're not creating impervious surfaces that are going to put more pollution into our communities? Because that's where your mind is. You're an environmental thinker. You just hadn't put it into the right box. So our moms were saying in Montana, we want to figure out how to teach our moms how to do this. They did it the first year, it was awesome. They came away from that meeting within 2 weeks. They had 3 mothers that had been appointed to a board or commission, and one that was a former state legislator that had gone to now be appointed to actually a city commission. I may have got that wrong. I know she's a city commissioner. There was another state legislator. Anyway, they were moving into power spaces. I went this year, and I was amazed at not only their energy, but how they had this underground current of teaching and training mothers to go into these spaces, and without anybody realizing, now have environmental voices in key places to make decisions. When we came away from that session, one of the young ladies, she had been really quiet, and she came to me and she said later on, you know, I've got an opportunity, I was really thinking about it, I don't know what to do. And I told her, just go for it, just go. I said, go show up the next day, go ask for it. And so she came back about 2 weeks later, and she said, I've been really busy, but I wanted to share with everybody. She said, I followed up, I went and asked for it, and they gave it to me. And she is now the, let me get this right, the operating director for Steve Bullock's campaign, who's running for president. It is amazing what you do when you just empower people to go, and she's got her environmental mind. I am super stoked about this, because I know that the person who's sitting there and talking to his ear is thinking climate. That didn't happen because we were calling for resumes. It did not happen because we were, you know, out here and saying, you know, gotta have climate. That happened from women sitting around a table and having a conversation and saying, be encouraging and saying, go do it. Who are you gonna say go do it to today when you leave? Think about it, and then go do it. Thank you all so much.